Chapter 10. Ambush. It would be many years until I would learn the true nature of the cloaked rider. I put it out of my mind, for we had a perilous fight ahead of us. My companion asks, wasn't I terrified? I was, but I was also young and foolish. The prospect of battle stirred me blood in the same way that telling tales did, except this was my own story. Or so I thought in my youthful arrogance. In truth, I was an observer to the passions, trials, and ambitions of Leusios, Elayna, and Kerne. Jorwin Weaver, The Keetish Cycle. Kerne was pleased. The storm had left a haze of dust that would take hours to settle. The air was translucent and tasted earthy. The sky north of the plain of the Elder Tombs was bright and clear in sharp contrast to the constant churning of clouds above. Altogether, that meant they would approach the enemy from the gloomier part of the plain under cover of the drifting dust. They found the ancient road and the bandits at the same time. "Quick, follow me!" Kerne led the others in a backward circle. The bandits had divided into 3 groups. He pointed at the largest group of 30, wearing Durian armor and Theliani blue, stolen from Marcos's dead men. Those bandits have taken a position on the road where they will be seen once their quarry crests the slight rise. He swung his finger to a point on the road between 2 giant tombs. The remaining bandits are hidden behind those tombs. Look, you can see one group of 10 with their backs to us. When Teneus sees the group on the road, he'll already be flanked. Vibnia nodded. 10 each side. Enough to trap him. Kerne squinted and then pointed. There. A column of dust coming out of the mountains. It must be Teneus. "Scorch it, that was close," growled Jorwin. "The Theliani must have broken camp at first light." Lucius studied the dust. "Does the road go anywhere near any of the mines we know about?" Kerne shook his head. "Not that I'm aware of. It cuts through to Lake Brenhedi, then it follows the cliff lines above the water." The younger man frowned. "So where's the gold coming from?" "Don't worry about that now. We need to get into a good position," Kerne said as he studied the 2 elder tombs closer to the bandits. "Follow me." Kerne led them to a vantage point on a tomb to the rear of the nearest team of flanking bandits. "Shouldn't one of us warn Teneus?" asked Leusios. "The bandits would see you." Kerne shook his head. "No. Just as they need the Theliani to walk into their ambush, we need them committed to their trap. Just be patient." Time passed. For all his impatience for the fight, Kerne kept his cool. They spoke in whispers and kept a watchful but cautious eye on the enemy. The bandits had hunkered down into their possessions and had a similar air of tension. Kerne peered at the dust cloud as dark forms started to appear, a column of legionaries and 5 carts marching in ignorance of what lay ahead. "We can do this," he exclaimed in a hushed voice. "If we take out the 10 nearest us with the element of surprise, Teneus and his men will be alerted. The odds will be nearer even." "Only if Hal is right about how good Durian veterans are," muttered Lucius. "How many does he have?" Vibnia studied them, her lips moving in a soundless count. 2 Dakari. That must be Teneus on the horse." "Good." Kerne could not resist a grin. The excitement of imminent battle was bubbling up again. He calmed himself and murmured a prayer to Alfena. "Good Spirit, intercede on my behalf. Ask for the Divine's blessing on the strength of my arm and resolution of my spirit." He circled his heart and then glanced around the others. They were nervous. Vibnia and Jorwin had the tension of any sensible person anxious about their fate. In contrast, Leusios fidgeted with energy and purpose. "It will work, I promise," he said to them. They watched as Teneus slowly entered the jaws of the trap. As Kerne predicted, the noble saw the bandits in Theliani blue some distance on the road ahead. He halted his chestnut mare and stood in his stirrups to study them. He raised his hand to call halt between 2 tombs perfectly flanked just as Garantos had planned. Kerne looked east to the 30 bandits in blue. He could see that they too had a mounted officer. That must be Garantos. "I see him," nodded Leusios with a hungry look. Kerne was impressed. He had expected the younger man to be more nervous. He gripped the lad's shoulder. "Stay on the flanks. Don't get caught in the melee." Leusios nodded. "As for the leader, we need him alive," Kerne murmured to them all. The bard gave him an incredulous look. "I'll be happy just keeping us alive." Kerne chuckled. Whatever apprehension his comrades felt, he just wanted the fight to start, regardless of the odds. He freed his greatsword from its sheath. "We spring their trap now before the main force arrives. Kill the flankers before Garantos' band closes in." "Now?" Leusios was fiddling with something small that glinted in his hand. "Yes." Kerne nodded towards the 10 men crouched behind the nearer tomb. They were hidden from the Durians, but in plain sight for them. "We rush them." There was an uncomfortable silence as the weight of the moment came upon them. Vibnia sighed and looked at Leusios with great reluctance. "Leusios, that thing you did." "What?" asked Leusios with a knowing smile and a raised eyebrow. Kerne looked between the priest and the miller's son with confusion. They both clearly understood each other, but Leusios wanted Vibnia to say it out loud. The priest grimaced and gave in. "The lightning strike. Can you do it again?" "Lightning?" Kerne asked Leusios. The younger man ignored him. His smile spread across his face as his fist uncurled to show a small glass vial. "If it will stay our secret." The grin shifted into a mercurial, even whimsical expression as he flexed his fingers. When the stopper came out of the bottle, Kerne immediately caught the strong smell of spice. He felt his skin crawl. "What?" Leusios swallowed the contents and gasped as a judder went through his body. He swept a hand towards the 10 bandits. One of them must have caught his movement because he turned to look. The blinding flash bleached the desert and dazzled Kerne. Then a crash of thunder boxed him in both ears and shook the tomb beneath his feet. He blinked out the spots blurring his vision, and the desert came back into focus. Wrapped in deafness, he became a mute observer. Of the 10 bandits in plain sight, 4 were twisted and charred bodies, while 2 were out cold. The surviving 4 were still reeling from the blast. Strange waves of sparks rippled over the surface of the tomb, like water struck by a pebble. All Kerne could hear was a distant ringing inside his skull, giving the world outside an unreal quality of numbing silence. Vibnia rose from her hiding place and shot at the 7th man, but missed. She calmly knocked a second arrow and loosed it again. Iron thunked into meat, and the man jerked into a spin, dead. Jorwin charged, his mouth open in a yell that was lost to Kerne. He struck one on the side of the head with the haft of his spear, dropping him cold. Kerne glanced up to see Leusios scowling down at him and shouting soundlessly. The younger man gestured him towards the fray. His foggy thinking evaporated in a sharp moment of clarity. Battle. The primitive orc within him snarled with delight, and he charged. Jorwin was being forced back by his opponent, as Kerne swept in and struck the bandit's head from his shoulders. The last man's mouth opened wide in a cry of alarm, but the sight of a half-orc warrior framed by the arc of arterial blood paralyzed him with fear. Unbridled, the orc killer was fully in charge. Without pause, Kerne chopped his blade into the bandit's neck and down through his chest. Dead. 10 enemies down. He flicked his gaze to the bandits in Thaliani blue. They were still a little way off. They knew something was happening. The bandit officer was reining in his startled horse, looking around for the source of the blast. Then he urged his men forwards, raising a hand in greetings towards Teneos, a final act of deception. Meanwhile, the 10 brigands on the far flank were paralyzed by confusion and did not attack. Teneos wheeled his own horse, looking about. He saw Kerne and shouted a question he still couldn't hear. It didn't matter. The half-orc drew a deep breath and gave the Durians both lungfuls. "Ambush!" Leusios had cast the lightning bolt without a great deal of consideration. In a moment of teenage arrogance, he had felt the need to give a show of power. Vibnia's invitation had been a victory of need over her supposed faith, but it had drained him terribly. Now for the leader. He had one vial left. "Ambush!" Kerne's roar urged him to his feet. Leusios tumbled onto the sand, still dizzy from the magic, and ran towards the Thaliani. The veterans had not shouted or panicked at the sudden blast. Instead, they tightened their formation and raised their javelins, waiting for orders. "Teneus!" Leusios shouted. The young noble turned in his saddle in response. "Counselor Miller?" The Durian lord recovered from the surprise quickly. "Scorch it, man! What's happening?" "They?" Lucius pointed at the advancing mass of blue-cloaked soldiers. "A brigand's ambushing you!" "As are they!" Lucius's voice went up an octave in fear as the bandits on the far flank finally recovered their senses and charged from their hiding place. One of the cart drivers took an arrow in the gullet. "Second to curry! Javelins left!" shouted Teneus. 10 javelins flew at the charging bandits. 2 fell. "Draw swords! Engage!" Teneus swung off his horse and handed the reins to a servant so he could join his 10 men facing forwards. "First to curry with me! Shield wall!" With Durian precision, the lead 10 men made a line across the road and locked their shields together with a clash of steel-rimmed wood. Kerne joined the end of the line, rubbing his ear. "There's 30 of them," he shouted to Teneus. "They'll envelop us." The bandits coming down the road abandoned their masquerade and broke into an ill-disciplined charge. Leusios backed away as Jorwin arrived next to Kerne and clapped him on his back. He didn't hear what the bard said to the half-orc. He was too desperate to be out of the ranks before they clashed. They were still outnumbered 2-1. He was here for one reason, to silence Garantos. He marked the man on the horse charging with the other bandits and reached for his last vial. An arrow hissed from the right and the charging brigand fell. Vibnia had found a vantage point from a fallen pillar and knocked another arrow to her bow. Teneus stood in the center of his line, sword gripped tightly in his hand, his eyes alive with fear, yet his jaw set. "These are honorless rogues, unworthy to clean your boots!" the noble yelled. "Remember your oaths! Remember Marcos! Sine cura, no mercy! No mercy!" roared the veterans. "Well, I agree," Leusios muttered under his breath. Everyone was yelling, and no one was watching him as he backed further away. He swigged down the last vial and felt instantly vital beyond mortal capacity. The awful power surged within him. It swelled in his marrow, threatening to peel his flesh from his bones and blast him into bloody chunks. He forced down the panic and fixed on the leader. The secret of the mage's cabin would die with Garantos now. His hand jerked out and burst with energy. The peal of thunder made the desert shudder, and the blistering light made hardened warriors flinch. "Magus!" yelled someone in warning. Drunk with crushing fatigue, Leusios smiled as his legs crumpled beneath him. He collapsed in a near faint. The afterglow of magic bathed him in contentment as he saw the commander and his horse were a smoking tangle of flesh and bone. His purpose was fulfilled. The mage's cabin was secure. Already partially deaf from Leusios's first lightning bolt, Kerne was less affected. He had not been looking in the direction of the flash as he felt the ground buck beneath him. While legionaries and bandits alike were bewildered by sound and light, he saw the whole blasted in the enemy line. An orcish battlefield was a chaotic place where each warrior sought a worthy match to test his strength. Kerne was unfamiliar with Durian tactics, but instinct told him a hole in any battle line would be exploited. He charged into the gap, bellowing, swinging his greatsword. He beheaded 2 men before both sides were yelling and pointing at him. A lower swing gutted another man, sending a spatter of gore across the dirt. The orc within him bellowed with sheer joy of battle as he spun and took one more in the throat. A twin-bladed warrior was shouting orders and running to face him. Kerne took enough of his measure to realize this man was no brigand. He moved with comfort in his armor, carrying a long cavalry sword in his right hand and a short gladius in his left. He gave the latter a deft twirl. That single act made Kerne pause. This man had not been daunted by the lightning blast and now sought him out. This foe was confident and skilled. He became acutely aware of the bandits closing in from all sides. He bared his teeth. "Your days of raiding are over." He spun out of reach of the two swords and dealt a crushing blow under the skull of the nearest bandit. Next, his greatsword smashed through a feeble parry of another. Although he failed to cut the arm off, he had surely crushed the bone to splinters. The man screamed and went down. "Wedge!" Teneos yelled, and 10 men drove forwards like a spearhead to follow Kerne. It was too late. The bandits were all about him, short swords stabbing from left and right. Teneos' wedge pushed forwards, but was already being lapped by the bandits' larger numbers and turning into a defensive triangle. Ducking and twisting, Kerne knocked back the attacks aimed at him in a whirl of parries. He was running out of space. He yelled and struck out in a wide arc to scatter the bandits and burst out to the far side of the melee. Two Swords was waiting for him. He twirled his short sword. "The half-orc," he muttered. Kerne just snarled and threw out 2 wild attacks. The warrior batted them away and countered with a flurry of his own. Kerne danced away defensively, using his strength to accelerate his slower weapon against threats appearing from nowhere. "Kerne!" Jorwin was yelling from his position next to Teneos, but the bard could not break through the bloody fray to reach him. Kerne cut and spun, only giving 1 attack for every 5 he parried. As he tired, it became 1 for every 10. Then the cavalry sword gashed his arm. Between the cheek plates of his helmet, Two Swords grinned in satisfaction and made a rapid sidestep to attack Kerne's injured side. Strength was leaving his body, in the blood running down his arm. Now he was only parrying for survival, relying more and more on instinct rather than skill. His vigor ebbed away. "Die, you bastard!" Two Swords cursed in frustration and dived in with a sequence of jabbing attacks. One punched through Kerne's hardened leather armor and deep into his chest. He tried to gasp, but felt his breath torn from his lungs. His injured arm lost all of its strength, and his hand slipped free from his sword hilt. No! His good arm buckled under the awkward weight of the greatsword. He let it go and made a fist. Two Swords pounced for the kill. Kerne threw a desperate punch and hit him in the jaw. The bandit went flailing for balance but regained it quickly. Then Two Swords froze. "Cease!" Vibnia approached, her bow quivering with tension, an arrow pointed at the man's chest. In that heartbeat of indecision, Teneos' second Dakari charged into the bandit flank. They had dispatched their 10 bandits and attacked with angry, bloody blades. At the very moment the bandits had thought Teneos surrounded, they died in a frenzy of killing. Panic set in, and the battle became a rout. Two Swords lowered his blades and spat. "I'll be damned if I'm going to run like a dog and be shot in the back." He faced Kerne squarely. "I know of you. I've heard that you are an honorable foe." He dropped his shorter swords into the dust. Then he reversed the cavalry sword and offered him the hilt. "I surrender to you." Gritting his teeth against the pain, Kerne took a moment to gather enough breath. "If you answer one thing, who wanted me dead?" The man answered without hesitation. "You were worth more alive. The man is called Calanthos, but I never met him." Kerne inclined his head and took the sword. Thus the argument began. Teneos approached Kerne, his young face spattered with someone else's blood. "Why is he still alive?" All around them, summary Durian justice was being delivered with brutal swiftness. Those not quick to flee were killed, followed by the injured. "He surrendered." Kerne ran out of breath and had to gasp in a little more. "Honorably, to me." He drew himself up to his full imposing height and showing the points of his teeth. He had hooked a thumb in his belt, so his arm was not so obviously weak. The orc within him was receding, its battle lust sated. Every breath was agony, and he could taste blood in his mouth. He was in no fit state for a fight, but neither was he going to allow more mindless slaughter. "Honorably?" Teneos exploded. "This filth doesn't know the meaning of the word." "He's no brigand." Kerne asserted calmly through shallow breaths. He faltered and blinked as a wave of dizziness washed over him. He put his good hand to his chest wound to press against the flow of blood. Two Swords was probably in his late 30s and had a military bearing he associated with the likes of Marcos and Antoninus. I think he is their leader.
That was their leader,
Teneus snapped, pointing at the smoking jumble of torched flesh and bone that had been a horse and rider. No, I think that one fitted your brother's armor better. He nodded at the prisoner, is the true leader, Garantos. We saved your life, Teneus Ambronius, and the life of your men. This one mercy is all I ask of you. Teneus was about to argue, but Kerne cut him off. Think, man. Only he knows the truth behind who paid for these attacks and murdered your brother. I am Garantos, declared the man. And yes, I have information. Leusios fumed. This was a disaster. He cast a dark look at the prisoner. If only Teneus's hot-headed nature had not been tamed by Kerne. Vibnia had not helped by supporting the half-orc. Scorch them all. Fortunately, the prisoner was unwilling to talk immediately. Vibnia recognized a worn, almost obliterated motif on the man's armor. You belong to House Justinius? She asked. No longer. My affiliation is for sale. Dispossessed? Garantos nodded.
A mercenary, Teneus spat. Expensive, I imagine. Only House Caesonius has the wealth to send you this far north.
Garantos stared back at him impassively.
I'll give you nothing until I have assurances.
The young noble swore darkly and went an angry red. That boy really was a victim of his emotions, Leusios observed. He could use that. A plan began to form. He pulled Kerne aside.
Earlier, we agreed that it is inconceivable that the old road could connect any of the Thaliani mines we know about.
Kerne was panting slightly from his chest wound and turned away to spit out blood-streaked saliva. Leusios was amazed the warrior was still upright. The half-orc took a moment to draw his breath and answer. Yes, the ancient roadway runs along the cliff line above Lake Brenhidi and ends in a landslide.
Let me look at that.
Jorwin interrupted him to inspect Kerne's wound.
You're lucky to be alive.
Kerne grinned through bloody teeth. Blessed, I would say.
Don't you see?
Lucius spoke to all of them excitedly, catching Vibnia's attention as well.
That's at the heart of their whole deception. House Stellianus didn't want anyone to know about another mine, one that they have managed to dig in secret and produces more than all their other mines put together. That's why they paid a tax on junk. It provides a cover story for where this gold actually come from. I wager that the value is far greater.
The priest gave a nod in approval of the logic.
Naughty, naughty,
Lucius drawled as he put the finishing touches to the plan in his mind.
We'd better investigate. Kerne, I assume you're strong enough.
Yes. So predictable. Exhausting the half-orc would buy him time to make his move on Elayna on his return, a little unexpected bonus to his plan. Jorwin opened his mouth to refute the half-orc's assessment of his fitness, but Leusios turned away from them and cleared his throat.
Teneus! Yes. I thought that the prima familia of the Empire always acted with honor. Caesonius doesn't, the lad snarled back. I'm referring to the illegal activities of House Stellianus.
He swept a hand toward the carts.
As a member of the council, I'm formally raising the charge that House Stellianus is operating a mine without due license from Blackstone. Jorwin Weaver, Vibnia, Aquitus, and Warrior Kerne will accompany me to investigate this matter. I expect you to return to Blackstone with our prisoner alive. Hand him over to Captain Hal. There you can have your gold properly assessed and the tax levied.
Teneus flushed.
We've already paid. Don't even try that. If you should be stupid enough to pay a tax on rocks, then that is your choice. I need your token of authority to visit this unlicensed mine and inspect it. You need to deliver this prisoner to Blackstone alive." Leusios studied Teneos' jaw muscles as they twitched around his clenched teeth. The noble was young and brash, like him. Would the embarrassment of being insulted and given orders in front of his men be enough to make him resentful? He decided to push the point harder and press the man closer to the edge. "You hand Garantos over unharmed, despite what he did to your brother, to the care of Captain Hal. Is that clear?" He loaded the order with disdain, trying to stoke enough anger to ensure rebellion. His legionaries surely would not balk at the order to kill the man who slew Marcos. Bitter and sullen, the Durian noble accepted with a curt nod. "Wait!" Jorwin was aghast. "Are you seriously suggesting that this prisoner and the truth of this whole affair is to be trusted to the Thaliani? Vibnia, you should go with them." The bard wanted the truth. How annoying. Leusios looked at Vibnia. She steepled her fingers deep in thought as his mind raced for an argument to dissuade her from joining the Thaliani. "No. I will investigate the mine," the priest decided succinctly. Leusios breathed a discreet sigh of relief. "I swear, no harm will come to him from my hand." Teneos put his fist to his chest for emphasis. "That's settled, then." Leusios opened his hands in a conciliatory gesture and smiled at everyone. "In my authority as counselor, I accept your pledge." He was delighted with the cleverness of Teneos' oath. As long as someone else killed Garantos, Teneos' honor was unstained. A flimsy excuse like "killed while trying to escape" would satisfy the council. He would make sure of it and earn a favor from Teneos. Surely the Durian's instinct for revenge would outweigh the spirit of the promise, and somewhere along the road back to Blackstone, Leusios' problem would be solved. That's the end of Chapter 10, Ambush. Do you remember the warning from the Elayna spirit? Well, Leusios' scheme to draw the group away and investigate the Thaliani mine brings an unexpected discovery and a danger they are ill-prepared to face. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If so, please like and subscribe, and maybe you know some folks who would like it too. See you next time.